Hello everyone and welcome to a new in and out video. Today I do want to share everything that has come into my life, everything I've potentially decluttered, all the books I've read in November, but also just how my month went. And actually I decided, because you might know on this channel, we want to focus more on the things we do, the things we feel, instead of the things we own. And so I thought, why not change it up? And from now on, and let me know what you think about that, first kind of talking about the month and then going into the stuff. That is of course part of this video, but so how was my November? So I do have to say November is kind of a hard month. I know for many people, and for me this year, I kind of really felt that. So with friends and family, there were some difficult things, and I just felt a little burned out. Like, I can't really even tell you where it's coming from, but sometimes there's just this feeling of like, I need time to rest. Now, thankfully, I also had a lot of time to rest in November. And so I think now coming into December, I actually feel better and I feel kind of prepared. I think Christmas is going to be okay and not too stressful. I'm looking forward to winter. I feel like I'm kind of on top of things again. I did some things that were on my to-do list for a long time. And so I think I have energy again for this next month. But I think we just need to be careful, especially maybe in November, and be kind to ourselves and make sure that we actually do get enough rest and that we are gentle and just not too hard on ourselves, because I know like Thanksgiving and Christmas time, it can be exhausting for many people. So I just also want to give that to you, remind you to take care of yourself as well as much as possible. And I do hope you have people around you that think the same way, and so they will take care of themselves and you can take care of each other as well. Apart from that, you might know I like nature, I love the weather and so it was wonderful this past months how much fog we had, and I love fog in autumn, and we had so much of it and it was beautiful. And unfortunately, I didn't get to like go outside as much as I maybe want to, but then on the other hand, I'm forced to go outside whenever I like go to work, to my social work job. And there were a lot of instances where I was like just riding my bike and it was just wonderful weather. It was, for example, when the sun was just rising and everything was foggy, when it was dark at night and I could see the stars, when I don't know, just during the day, the like last autumn leaves. And so I actually did have some beautiful nature experiences while riding my bike to work or home from work. But now I think let's get into the stuff part of the video. So what has come into my life in this month? Now, one thing that I knew would be coming is this beautiful sweater. And I got this sweater from my grandma's. They knit it for me, and they just they knit a lot of sweaters for different people, and then they asked me if I want to have one as well. And they also made one for my son, and I got to pick the colors. They made it, and now I have a new sweater. And I know I have enough sweaters, like that's not the question, but like a handmade gift like this, and sweaters like these are especially warm because they're not like, the wool isn't treated to make it soft and machine washable per se. Like it's still possible when you have like special wool washing programs, but it's extra warm. It's a bit scratchy, but I don't really care about that. And so I do hope that this sweater is gonna bring me a lot of warmth during many coming years. I have already worn it a few days, but I'm sure I will wear it a lot more, because if you have the possibility for someone or yourself to make a sweater exactly how you want it, I could tell them the exact measurements. So it actually fits my body the way I want it to fit, and I think that's beautiful. And so yeah, I do have another sweater in my life, which kind of made me need to rearrange some of my wardrobe again, because now the sweaters actually have almost one drawer entirely to themselves. But as many months, we did go for a walk and passed by this shed we have in our neighborhood where everyone can just bring stuff and take stuff they don't need anymore. But or that they need. And we also brought a bunch of stuff, but I found this pair of jeans. And now it's like not a great brand, you can read it, it's Zara, but they fit me well. Around like my waist and my butt. But they're just short and wide, and please let me know what you think about it, because I kind of feel like you cannot wear something like this. It just looks weird, but maybe it's also a trend that I've just not seen enough to feel comfortable wearing. I was thinking that I would either make them longer or make them shorter. So I would either cut them into jeans shorts or extend the leg of this pair of jeans. I do actually have 2 pair of pants that will have to leave my wardrobe in the near future, I think. And so I'm always happy, especially when it comes to jeans, to find something that fits me well. While with these, it's just that they're kind of too short. And I actually checked, like if someone just cut them off, but no, you can clearly see that they're meant to be this way because the seam is fixed here. So it's not something that someone could have done at home with their sewing machine. And so I'm sure that this is meant to be this way, but I just kind of think it looks weird. Let me know what you think. And then we also went to a secondhand store this month to just go look for some things for our household. But we also looked at the book section. And actually, my boyfriend and me, we picked out these books together, but I bought 3 books. They were just 1 or 2 euros each. And actually, coincidentally, they are all about climate change. So we have this here, and I think the title is kind of cute. It's Climax, like clima slash, it's not a slash, an X. And I think this is just a beautiful book. Like, I picked it up first because I thought it looked beautiful, but then it also sounded good. I will talk more about these once I've read them. Die unbewohnbare Erde, Leben nach der Erderwärmung, which means something like the uninhabitable Earth, living after climate change. Sounded interesting as well. And then the third one is Unsere Welt neu denken, which means thinking our world in a new way. It's an invitation, it says here, and it's also about how we can live more sustainably in a way that will work for everyone. 3 climate books in, but then also I have an out. I've read this book, and let's just start with it because I have it in my hand already to tell you that I'm decluttering this, while this also actually means that my boyfriend will be wanting to read it, so it's not gonna leave our apartment, but he will, take it into his possessions. So this was Beklaute Frauen by Leonie Schöler, which the title means robbed women or something like that. And it's a lot about like women in history that have been robbed of their achievements, of their status, of their professions, of their also like that they didn't get prizes, that they weren't able to compete, that they just didn't get the recognition they deserved for what they did for humanity, for their job, for other people, things like that. And it's always about men kind of, because of policies or because they're assholes, grabbing the stuff that actually women did and women achieved and using it to make themselves better. And sometimes it was just meant nicely, like, you're a woman, you cannot publish something, but I'm your husband and I can, so let's just publish it under my name, which could be understood as like nice because then it can be published, but then on the other hand, the women are just made invisible, which is also not okay. So it just kind of shows us how unjust our world has been to women during the past few hundred years, but also how it's not actually there yet, and women do not get the recognition today that they deserve. And now, as you can see, we've already entered the books section, books I read this month, and I'm gonna try to make it really quick because I've read so many books this month. But yeah, let's continue with the books that I already had to return to the library, and then we're gonna continue with the ones that are still here, there, sitting there. The next book I read is called Ja heißt ja und, which kind of means yes and it was a lot about sexual assault and sexualized violence and just male on female violence, and how we can think consent in a different way, And it was interesting. It was a short book, and I can highly recommend you read it if it's available in English or if you speak German. So I'm gonna link all the books down below as always, just so you know if you want to check them out. The next one was The Transition Baby, and it is a book about the lives of mainly trans women. And I thought it was just heartwarming, interesting, fun to read on one hand, and on the other hand, it's of course still painful and real, and there are a lot of sad things in there as well, and it just felt really real, but still like in a good way as well, hopeful, I think. So I can highly recommend that book as well. Then the next book I read is called Das Patriarchats der Dinge, which kind of means the patriarchy of things. And that was actually a bit similar to this book. And it's a lot about like how design can be sexist and patriarchal and just think about men's. No matter if it's about like public toilets or if it's about like crash dummies. That's also something, if you know the book Invisible Women, that's one I read like 2 or 3 years ago. It reminded me of that a lot, but it was featuring like different stories and different problems. But it was just like pointing out how much women are just not taken into account when things are designed, when cities are designed, when products are designed, when language is designed, things like that, which sometimes is like more conscious or less consciously designed, but it's crazy and it's not okay because women are half of the population and still they're overlooked in so many ways. And it's a disadvantage. Like, it's not that just, oh, there's no pink version. Absolutely not. No, it's like, it's a disadvantage for our society that women are not thought about when these things are designed. So I can also highly recommend this book. It feels like I've read a lot of good books this month. The next book I read is called Queer, eine deutsche Geschichte vom Kaiserreich bis heute, which kind of means queer German story from like the, how is that called? The Caesar. No, it's not Caesar. I don't know. Like from old times, like a few hundred years back until now. And it just kind of goes through the queer community and policies and culture from the past about 150 years. And I thought it was really, really interesting because it showed just how queer people have obviously always been there, but also what kind of choice and pains and discrimination, but also possibility they've had throughout history, and how things change, how things got better and worse. And it was really interesting and informative, so I can also highly recommend you this book. I don't know if it's available in English though. And now we're entering the books that I have here with me. So the next one I read is this one. It's called Dinge, an die wir nicht glauben, but it was originally written in English, as far as I know, and the title was Memorial. Okay, that's a very different title, but it's the story about like a gay couple and they're kind of just struggling. So it's very, very different from like romance books that focus on the phase of getting to know each other. It's so much more about just living after a few years and identity and struggles and life. And again, it was just one of these books that felt really real and good. So I always forget to mention the authors, but then on the other hand, it's just, the video is already super long, but maybe I should. Let me know what you think. T.J. Klune. I've read a lot of his books and I liked all of them a lot. It's called Aus Sternen und Staub in German, which means like made from stars and dust kind of. But in English, I think it had a different title. It's The Bones Beneath My Skin. And I really, really, really liked it. It's fantasy, it's a love story, it's a queer love story. It makes us question certain things. And it was heartwarming. I really liked the book. But then a few days ago, I actually remembered that some of the relationship actually felt a bit abusive or not actually really okay. But then there are circumstances that make you feel like, yeah, okay, it kind of has to be this way maybe. I don't know. So while reading the book, I didn't feel like, oh my God, that this is not okay. But then thinking about it much later, it's like, oh, is it a bit toxic? I don't know. Still, I do recommend this book. Then I read a book I do not recommend. Like, I think the title is actually a great, like, joke, kind of. It's Who Cares? And it's about care work. And then the subtitle is Von der Freiheit, Frau zu sein, which kind of means about the freedom of being a woman. And it's written by this author that's kind of, I think she's liked by many people, and many people think she's an authority and she knows what she's talking about, and I hated this book. Like, when I hate a book, usually I don't read it, right? But the thing is that she's not like, it didn't feel like she would completely disagree with me, you know? She doesn't hate women. But then on the other hand, there were so many things in here that kind of support patriarchy and are misogynistic and bad, and I just hated it. I was so angry reading this book because there are things that kind of, a few examples are kind of like victim blaming and making mothers responsible for if they are not 100% happy, like making it seem like everything is so easy and individual people could just end any kind of sexism. And I kind of just a lot of victim blaming, actually. So I cannot recommend this book. But another book I can recommend is this one. I've wanted to read this for a long time because I follow her on Instagram. It's written by Hami Nguyen, and it's Das Ende der Unsichtbarkeit, which kind of means the end of invisibility. And it's about anti-Asian racism. And she herself is immigrated when she was a small child. Tells the story of discrimination, of pain, and of just having to be afraid that no one cares about you, that you are just a number in a system, and that like the German bureaucracy just treated so many people not as people, but I don't know. It's still a hopeful story, and it just points out how we need to change, how we need to make sure that human rights are just not a question, that everyone has their human rights met. And especially also when it comes to refugees and things like that, and just how policies can make lives painful, and how it's not logic. It doesn't make sense a lot of times that some people are discriminated so much, or how fast it can change from like, oh, you're very welcome to look after yourself and you're not worth anything for us as like the German bureaucracy. I don't know. I thought it was really an important book. People need to know more about anti-Asian racism, and I can highly recommend you read it if you speak German. Then I read this book. It is a lesbian love story, or one of the people is actually might be bi, I'm not sure, but it's written by a man. And now, let me know what you think about that. Because on one hand, I think like, yes, you can not only write about your own experience, but then on the other hand, it was not a well-written book. And now I'm not sure, you know, as soon as I figured out like, this is written by a man, it was like, oh, wow. And now I'm blaming everything I didn't like about this book on this fact. But then on the other hand, maybe that's not true. There are a lot of bad romance books out there. So maybe it's not the fact that a man wrote this that I didn't like it. And I honestly have to say it wasn't that incredibly bad, but then it was hard for me to immerse myself into the story or to really believe the characters, and I think that's a really bad sign for a romance book. So, not sure about this one. But another one that kind of took me a long time to read, and this cover looked like it's like 40 years old. It's very new. It was published this year. It's called Limitarismus, which means limitarism, which I always read militarism, the first 20 times at least, and it's Warum Reichtum begrenzt werden muss. Somehow I just don't have the words to translate the title completely, but it means something like while there must be a cap on rich people, like people shouldn't be able to own as much as they want or can, or something like that. And it's just a very, very well-written book about her over 10 years of research when it comes to like being rich or money, and how much the inequality is getting bigger, and kind of the question if it makes sense that people own this much money. And yes, I know a lot of people think like, oh yes, they deserve it, they worked hard. But in this book, you can just see how much it's hurting societies that rich people exist. And yes, we think like, no, we just need to end poverty, but no, it's not just about giving a little bit of money to the people who have nothing. No, it's a lot about limiting how much rich people can own. And it makes a lot of sense. And this is not hateful, this is not envy, this is not like just weird utopia. Well, it's a utopia, but it makes a lot of sense for everyone. Like, even for the rich people, and definitely for the economy, and definitely for like 90% of the people like that are not the richest 0.1%. So I highly recommend you read this book. This is definitely a book that does exist in English. Let me see if it has a different title there. No, it's Minimalism, The Case Against Extreme Wealth. So check this out. The next book I read is this one. Now, this is very much so a book that's written for teenagers, it felt like. It's called More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera, and it has a new ending. Like, I think it was published like almost 10 years ago, but then it got a new ending. And I'm glad it got a new ending, and I really like this book. It's a bit fantasy, but then also very much so rooted in our world, it feels like, and it's a love story, and it's a beautiful one, and it's devastating as well, and I really liked the book. But it's very much so written for young people, but you know, adults can read it as well. The next one I read, Die letzten Tage des Patriarchats, which means the last day of the patriarchy. And this is kind of a collection of, I think, 75 articles this woman wrote for different like newspapers. And it was interesting, but it was a bit exhausting to read because it was like 75 times like kind of a new subject. But I got to know her as a writer, and I like her point of view. And it's just a lot about like patriarchy, racism, sexism, feminism, love, our society, politics. But it was very interesting, and it's like from the time between like I think 2014 to 2018 or something like that, 2011 to 2018. But it was really interesting, and I can recommend it if you speak German. The next one I read is the last one. Finally, it's this one, and it's again by T.J. Klune, which I mentioned. I read a lot of his book and I liked all of them. It's The Extraordinaries. And this is the first of 3 books. And honestly, I do have to say, this one I didn't like that much. It's, again, the case that I think it's kind of written for teenagers more than for young adults, new adults. But the thing that I mainly hated is that the plot was not a surprise at all. So there are a few moments when you figure something out, and maybe it should be like, oh, wow, okay, I didn't think that. But I kind of thought all of these things like 300 pages in advance. There was nothing that surprised me, and maybe it was meant to be that way. But then I kind of question why you would do that, because it was just not surprising as well, but the story was made in a way that kind of should be surprising. That's my critique. But on the other hand, why not? It's a good book. It's a queer love story as well, and you can read it if you want, if you don't want very surprising plots. That's it. I read 14 books this year, and I now kind of have the goal to read 100 books this year, and it might be possible. So we'll see. You're gonna know in a month. But this brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching it. Let me know what you think about the books. Let me know what you think about everything, how your November went. And then I also will link you a video here that you can check out now. And I do want to mention thank you to all of my patrons, because I have Patreon and you can get an extra podcast episode every single week there on Patreon. So maybe that's something for you. Maybe you want to check that out. But other than that, I do hope to see you there in my next video or on Patreon. Goodbye.